The Chinese government has called in the US ambassador after President Trump signed into law a bill that supports pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. The Human Rights and Democracy Act threatens Chinese and Hong Kong officials deemed responsible for human rights abuses in the territory with sanctions. The bill requires the State Department to verify every year that Hong Kong retains enough autonomy from the rest of China. It also excludes Hong Kong from any US trade sanctions which might be imposed on the Chinese mainland. At the same time, President Trump signed a second bill which bans the export of crowd control munitions to police in Hong Kong, including tear gas, rubber bullets and stun guns. But China has hit back, saying it will take firm countermeasures if the US continues, in their words, to interfere.
The Chinese government is unwavering in its determination. It will oppose any external forces interfering in Hong Kong's affairs. It will implement one country, two systems, and it will safeguard national sovereignty, security and development interests. We advise the United States not to act arbitrarily. Otherwise, China will take firm countermeasures. All consequences arising from this must be borne by the United States.
Well, a rather different response from the Hong Kong protest movement. This is what the student activist Joshua Wong had to say.
For US President signed on the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, that's the remarkable achievement of all the Hong Kongers. With the courage and determination of Hong Kongers to fight for freedom and democracy to start the protest movement on June, it just encouraged world leaders around the world and politicians aware that it's time for them to stand with Hong Kong.
Well, I've been speaking to our correspondent Steve McDonald in Beijing, and I asked him how he thought China would react.
So obviously the Chinese government is not happy and has called in the US ambassador for the second time in a week to give him a dressing down here in Beijing, and the message was passed on to him that the US should change its mind and back down so as to avoid further deteriorating the relationship. But until we can see what these firm countermeasures are, it's hard to see how serious the fallout's going to be.
It's a sort of mixed message from President Trump as well, isn't it? He said he signed this and has respect for President Xi, the people of China and the people of Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think those sort of the commentary out of President Trump has left people scratching their heads here in China. On the one hand, he's saying, there's Xi Jinping, best friend of mine, I respect him. And on the other hand, he's then passing this bill or signing off on this bill. But I think he didn't have a choice, really, because if he hadn't done that, Congress would have passed it anyway, as they're able to do, because it had overwhelming support. The other interesting thing was this kind of, bizarre-sounding commentary from President Trump that, at the same time, that the only reason that troops had not come from the mainland into Hong Kong was because of a conversation he had with Xi Jinping, in which he sort of said, well, best friend, don't do that or you'll harm the trade war. Well, I think, many people wonder whether that conversation really took place, and if it did, whether or not he said anything like that. But if you wanted to, put a spanner in the works in terms of the trade war, the Chinese government would say this is just the way to do it. They're very unhappy about this move from the US government.
Steve McDonald. In Hong Kong itself, police are still clearing up the Polytechnic University and gathering evidence there. The campus was the scene of violent clashes between police and student protesters for several days. Our correspondent Nick Beak is there. We're going to hear from him about other issues in a moment, but just to see what he witnessed about a couple of hours ago.
Hopefully we're not in the way, but these are petrol bombs that they're taking away. Probably for forensic examination, but they're trying to make this place safe. You can see the bow and arrow and the petrol bombs, and that really is an indication of the work that is going on today, and we're just being moved back, as you can see, from this lady.
And we also heard from Nick about what he thought was going to happen now regarding Hong Kong and China.
The police are now on the site, and for the past 10 or 11 days it's only been the protesters who have been here, holed up in one way or another. At its maximum there are about 1,000 protesters, we believe, but now you just see the police officers who are bagging up evidence, and although they say today they're trying to look for any prospective protesters who are still here, the emphasis is on health and safety and getting people safely out of here. But at the same time, I mean, this is a crime scene, I guess, and so that's why some officers are collecting evidence which could be used in prosecutions at in the future. At the same time, we've seen a massive stash of unused petrol bombs being taken out of here. Also, we saw some bow and arrows being carried out, all the detritus and all the weapons that the police were coming up against in what was one of the most dramatic and violent episodes in this conflict, which has gripped Hong Kong over the past 5 or 6 months. We saw that many people were arrested as they tried to escape, and they were met with a hail of rubber bullets and tear gas. Some escaped, others arrested. There was a suggestion last night that maybe up to 20 people could still be inside. We might see today, if people are brought out, whether that actually was the case, but certainly the authorities here, under a new police chief, I think will be keen to prosecute people if they can.
Nick Beake. Let's just take you live to the centre of Hong Kong because there is a Thanksgiving rally taking place there now, local time, 7 minutes past 7 in the evening, ahead of Thanksgiving weekend in the United States, also in the light of President Trump signing that human rights bill supporting pro-democracy protests in the semi-autonomous territory.